the fact that you are led into certain world. So for some kind of art, pre-visualization will not apply. You just have to forget about it. And if you don't feel like doing something that to an extent shows the finished product, then it would be just a loss of effort, a loss of time. And well, the example that I'm showing you is a very individualistic. The Blue is not a genre cinema, but I took it because Kieślowski had deep respect for the viewer when he did his weird films. I don't know whether the word weird is the best. Definitely they were not mainstream genre cinema. He never forgot about the audience. All of his films, Double Life of Veronique and The Blue, they were successful and they also turned into blockbusters. So there is something in these films. We'll talk about it, we'll analyze it. But there was something in the films that pulled people to the cinema. I took this film because I was involved in the preparation of the film. It's meaningful because I'm a kind of witness. You can criticize things and I'm not going to defend anything simply because I'm one of people that contributed to the final shape of the film. So the Blue is going to be used for pure, say, analysis, because based on pre-visualizations that I have watched, there are certain things that are missing the credibility. When you talk about Kieślowski, we talk about a film director who started in documentary film production. I'll tell you an anecdote because it reflects his thinking well. When we made a short film about killing, then at a certain moment the problem was we had a taxi stand, there were people standing in the taxi stand, and this stand actually existed, and because of the light, the sun, I realized it would be better to move the taxi stand by 200 meters because it was better contrast, better illumination, and so simply the post with the word taxi should be relocated. And I said it to the people, and then Kieślowski turned red in his face, approached me and said, Idziak. Always when he used my family name, I knew he was furious. Idziak, if in my film a man gets out from a bus number 123 at a bus stop, then in this city, on this street, at this bus stop, this specific place, you do have 123 bus, and if he goes there twice a day, morning and evening, will film her exactly at that times. And I remembered this anecdote well. 2 years later we went to France. Krzysztof was in France for the first time and we were there for the Double Life of Veronique. So he didn't know a word in French and his English was really next to nothing. And then I asked him, and Kieślowski, where's your 123 bus stop? Please show me the place. So the credibility that you were fighting for, where is it now? And you know, by using the term Double Life of Veronique, we talk about something which by definition is not credible. It is not credible that at a given time in the world, for a normal, logically thinking person, it's just unthinkable. However, it does the main role, and you have to remember it. Credibility in art is not linear. We will talk about it at greater length later. Credibility for Kieślowski was absolutely important at the beginning. He did not nothing against common sense at the beginning of the film, whereas later on he didn't have any problem. Just an example, in the very same film Double Life of Veronique, there's a scene Veronique running out. She's furious because she finds herself as an object of experiment. The man can see her boyfriend, the one that has just offended her so much a moment ago, and then she runs out because she can see somebody getting out from the taxi. She jumps on the taxi and the taxi goes away. 3 seconds later, and he looks around, but the taxi is already 300 meters away. Cut. Veronica in the hotel. He turns away from the reception, and who's there? The man. Is it credible? It's absolutely incredible, not possible. In Paris, a man that was running after the taxi. Well, if there was a traffic jam, but there was no traffic jam on the way, and the scene at the very end, absolutely incredible. It doesn't matter, it's not credible, because you are already emotionally locked into the film. And I would say that at the beginning, I have not bought yet, but I see I'm in an absurd circumstances. And obviously it is a kind of, it's a repelling for us all, because you may feel that you are mistreated, you are not treated as an intelligent human being. This is one thing. And another one, quite a frequent trend, again, not in all of the films, however, in some of them, they treat viewers as people that go to the cinema to solve riddles. You don't go to the cinema to make puzzles, solve riddles or secrets. You don't go to the cinema to listen to a lecture, and you don't go there to do detectives' work. In a way, yes, because things are unpredictable. This is one of the fundamental rules in the drama, unpredictability. And obviously, you sort of lead the viewer, you show him traces, and these traces are misleading. However, if you have a riddle after riddle and a riddle after riddle, then you just don't care any longer. You don't want this film. And I think that you usually go to the cinema to have a time out from your daily life, to sort of forget about daily problems, or to have some time out from your boring life. Well, the genre of the film is very important indeed, because it defines our needs of film watching. So I would say that we go to the cinema, just as Milos Forman said. He said once, I can always remember when I make my films that people go to the cinema because it's a holiday time from their normal life. People just want to take a rest, take a break. So this is another thing. Well, I have an impression that the holidays, the ability to be cut off from my reality for a moment, the ability to get immersed in the story told in the cinema, it's not seriously treated in these materials, and there are certain elements. We'll talk about it vis-a-vis Kieślowski's film. It's really good to have some examples, some benchmark that you can compare things against. And the third thing, the sense of time is missing there. Well, often we have this problem. You go to the cinema and you see that something is really pulled out. There's a story for 20 or 30 minutes and the film director is struggling with it and trying to have a feature film, or just vice versa. What you're watching is overpacked with things, overburdened with facts, and it's really impossible to watch it. There's a lecture that I'm really waiting for. Maliszewska has this lecture, and the subject is quite promising. Rhythm, not only music. Well, a film, like any other phenomena, artistic phenomena, and it's true about painting and obviously photography and cinema. But the cinema, not as visual art, but the whole thing, the rhythm, when it is overloaded, when it is overpacked with things, then you cannot tune in as a viewer. So these are my impressions associated with pre-visualization. Yes, Anya? Does it work? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. No more microphone hitting. Please, don't kick the microphone. It does work. Take my word for it. I just wanted to say, well, as for the credibility that you referred to at the beginning, if we have genre cinema or something similar to genre cinema, like Inception, I don't know whether you have seen it. So, well, talking about credibility, at the beginning, they show us things that are against the truth, absolutely. And I remember I was taught in the school, when you have a science fiction film, then credibility is ensured by coherence of the character. If you are an introvert, you shouldn't behave as a social butterfly. But is it enough, or should we add something to it? Well, obviously it is true. You know, we will elaborate on it when we talk about genres in the film. When you are in a multiplex and you see lots of posters and you haven't heard anything about the film, we don't know what film it is, you haven't read any review, and there are no stars, yes? Because these are all hooks. You go to the cinema because you've read a review or heard people talking about it. So if you know nothing up front, so then what you base your selection on is the genre. You feel like watching a thriller, or today you feel like watching a science fiction film because you want to be out of the reality, or a war film, if it is your interest. I get prepared, and mentally I prepare for what I want to watch. This is my holiday, yes? If I'm under stress, I don't want any more stress watching a war movie. No, I don't care. I want a different type of leisure. And this is something that people forget about. Targeting, audience targeting. If you cannot imagine who's going to watch your film, if you cannot be precise about it, look, don't make films. Stop it, because then you have no addressee. You take a bottle, you throw the bottle into the ocean, and you don't know where it will get to, who will catch it one day. And in this sense, the credibility turns into certain principles of the craft. And if I go for a comedy and during the initial 5 minutes I don't laugh, I'm disappointed, because I expected to be entertained, and I don't care about the second act and the jokes then, because the clash between my world and this film at the beginning is most important. Well, because we cannot have here any kind of proper course on the film structure. I do have such classes, however, 1 week, 8 hours a day is too little to talk about film structure. So what we have today is a real synopsis. It's an abbreviation. I'm just pulling certain things out because they seem important to me, and I'm just thinking about what you should do to buy the potential viewer, or in your case, the producer, because you need somebody to offer the money, yes? And apart from making pre-visualization, apart from the actual doing process, you have to remember whom you are doing it for. I don't think it's a worse version of the script if in the pre-visualization you are not raising the bar. What for? It's a loss of time. If your pre-visualization is just a very chaotic recording of what was written, or very often not written. Quite often you just improvise because a subject was thrown in. The dialogues are weird. Yes, we are surrounded by people that talk no sense for hours. It's unbearable. It's unbearable in life. How could you bear it in the cinema? So the idea of credibility is obviously associated with the genres of films. Okay. Well, I talked about it yesterday. However, perhaps before that I should mention something else. It seems important to me. I think it may help us become aware of something that I tried to explain yesterday. We are all conservative. We do accept novelties, but we don't really live in new ways. Perhaps not everybody attended my lecture. Well, did I talk about it yesterday? About Skolimowski? Did I talk about Skolimowski last night? No, I didn't. So this is a story of my school. Yes, in the film school there was a student, Jerzy Skolimowski. For foreigners, I may just add that he's a film director who in the 70s was very successful indeed. Twice he was awarded in Cannes, and he made beautiful films like Deep End and Cry, beautiful films, a friend of Polanski. Until today, he is active as a film director. Last year in Venice, I think he was awarded for his film. I don't remember the title, whether it was a film about an Afghan refugee. And he, in the film school, when he joined the film school, he realized that, well, it was so in our film school, that the school was not a film school, but just a great production studio. At that time, the communistic system gave great resources. When I had my first film, I had 2 tracks of equipment. And the people, we got professionals to work with, but for my first professional film, I got only 1 truck full of equipment. So in the school, we had better conditions than in real life. And Skolimowski was aware of it. He came to the school and he had an idea of a feature film. And his students' works, well, he also used us as camera people, and we made some exercises with him. He every year made a bit, and when he finished the school, he had his feature film ready. In this film there was also his late wife, well-known Polish actress, but in a way he demonstrated it to us all. How can you use the school? Do you think that anybody followed him? None of us. But this is the way we are. I mean, I didn't do anything myself, and I also could have done it, just like him. But this is what we are. We talk about what we want, but when you get the opportunity, you don't do it. When I was in the film school, I thought, if I had the money, I would buy the camera and I would buy the material. Everybody wanted to film. And now what? You have a camera in your mobile phone. Do you make films every day with it? If you do anything, it's chaotic, it's careless, done without any thinking, really. I talked about it yesterday, but it's important, so I'll repeat it. You have to remember about the difference between my generation and your generation. Yes, your generation is what you see is what you get. This is the computer system, yes? In the past we didn't have it, now it's just obvious. However, it's also obvious whenever I am on set and talk to a film director, he or she has to see my explanation of how the picture would look like. It's not accepted. He or she has to see it in a screen. We didn't have this opportunity, so we had to construct a picture in our mind and we had to transmit it to another person by using our words. I'm repeating it because, in a way, the difficulty to use the camera, to use the film that was so costly in the past, it forced you to make selections in your mind. You don't have to do it because the material is given to you for free. And in a way, it's a risk. I am not against it. It's not criticism. But I think it's very important to remember that in a way, an excess is a mistake too. If you have too much, you end up in a mess, mental mess, and quite often it reflects in the set and it's no good at all. Alright, so the thing that I found really striking in the pre-visualizations, usually there was a problem with the protagonist, and perhaps I should start by saying so. That's why I asked for the flip chart. Maybe what I'm going to say is obvious to you, but when I watched the 13 pre-visualizations, I had an impression that these things are not obvious. Again, not everybody. When I say in general, it's not that I'm criticizing all the pre-visualizations, because there are certain conclusions that you have to draw when you see them all put together, and that's why I'm repeating it. You will see them if you want. It will be demonstrated here, and you will be able to draw your own conclusions. Perhaps I will write down something which I personally elaborated upon, but I found the initial thought in some book on script writing, and I think that it is just a checklist. A pilot before starting the plane's engine has a whole list of things, a checklist of things that must be verified. So it would be a good reference point, I say. We have to check whether we have satisfied these needs in our script. This is to be remembered. 4Ps plus S. It's going to be in English because it comes from an English book. And now, one by one, the first thing that we'll talk about, protagonist and the dramatic problem of the protagonist. So if you have a hero that's flat, inactive, surely you have such films with passive protagonists, but basically it's an introduction to a film failure. If you don't know what the problem of the guy is, you don't know what the guy is fighting for, if he or she is not active, we are in trouble. Well, surely about something in general. Well, sometimes the character is passive, but if you look at the whole cinematography, perhaps 2%, 5% of protagonists are passive. So the dramatic problem shapes the character. By solving a problem, your protagonist changes during the film. He or she carries something that we must never forget. The protagonist, this is a gate to your own identification with the work. This is a gate. When you were not here, the man sitting in the third row told me about making a casting, and he found great actress. Andrzej Wajda was once asked, Andrzej, what film directing is really about? Andrzej said, good casting. Good actors. Well, yes, the journalist said it's very obvious indeed. Yes, the casting is important, but what else? And then Andrzej said, nothing more. Well, obviously it's exaggerated. However, if you look at it from the other angle, you can have marvelous script, you can have genius DOP and film director, but if you have wrong casting, if your main protagonist is not able, if your lead actor is not able to carry the burden, is not able to form the emotional link between the viewer and the screen, then your film does not exist. It's not true that you pay millions of dollars for actors. Well, they do have something, and it's really beyond any definition, I guess. They are charismatic, and I can tell you dozens of anecdotes about it. However, a good anecdote is the example of the actress in the double life of Veronique. Kieślowski didn't want her. He wrote a script for Andy McDowell, and the jury in the Cannes Festival videotapes Sex and Lies, yes? And he was so satisfied with Andy McDowell that he wrote a script for her. But in Europe, we didn't have enough money to engage her, and the producer was negotiating. And she finally selected an Australian film director. I don't remember his name. Greencut. Do you remember the director? Greencut, yes? And well, and we lost an actress, so we started searching, yes? We started searching for a different person. And Irene Jacob, but nobody liked her. Like the things in the screen, she won by one vote in France. Then Kieślowski took the demo to Poland, and in Poland they had a look at it. His friends like Piesiewicz, Preisner, an editor, they had a look at it and said she's pretentious, and he was really on the border because Kieślowski did know that without good cast, the film will never exist. He will lose. Without good lead actor, good protagonist that sort of attracts you, that in a way forms an emotional bond between the viewer and the screen, there's nothing. So then he asked his daughter, Marta, at that time was doing her finals. She showed these photos to her friends, and the youngsters fell in love with it. And obviously he also fell in love with her later on, but he said allegedly it's a film for the youth. If they like her, let's take her. But he hesitated so much. He thought about Andy McDowell so much that during the first 2 weeks of filming he was not sure whether it is a mistake or not. And obviously many film directors experience the same dilemma, and you always have a question then. Well, often students ask me a question when you talk about positive characters and about identification. If you have a negative character, and they say there is a very deeply rooted fascination with the evil, and that is why when you construct your character, you have to remember that they must not be flat, one dimension only, black on black, single dimension. No, you identify with the people that have something inside, something that reminds us of something that we know. We don't like people that are perfect. And when you talk about American parlance, yes, you have this term tragic flaw. Tragic fault means dramatic fault. If your character is imperfect, if there is a crack in the character, some soft spot, such a person becomes more three-dimensional, and he or she attracts the viewer. It's much better than black on black or white on white. And every artist could remember about it. We've seen millions of models of the protagonist. Well, in general, you have to feel that, well, quite often I feel like this about films, that those that make films feel that they talk to simpletons. Yes? Our viewers watched hundreds of thousands of films already, so perhaps they are not able to call things by their names, but they are well-educated film watchers. If you watch lots of things throughout your life, then in a way it gets rooted in yourself. There was this joke: Russian guy comes to America and he had problems in learning English, so he was told, yes, you should watch television non-stop. When you watch television non-stop, you'll master English language. So yes, he spent half a year watching television only, and when he left his flat, he was marvelous in speaking Spanish, because he watched the wrong channel. So subconscious is something that helps us learn things. And your viewer, they would feel they are in hands of somebody who's not able to maintain their attention. If film exposure is too long, it's obvious for the viewer this guy is not able to tell a story. If presentation of the character is banal, if it is unnoticeable character, then it's a mistake. These elements are definitely important. Afterwards, when we analyze the blue, when we go through the script, then we'll come back to the problems of Binoche and the character of Juliette, yes, in the film. And very often we will, especially in this film, because the whole impact of the film is built on the actress, the attraction, the power of Binoche, her charismatic character. Without all these things, the film will never exist. You could have a marvelous actress that wouldn't be able to carry it. And on the other hand, you have to remember how much Krzysztof was rising the bar in searching for the right actor. The plot. Well, it is obvious. We love stories. When we were kids, we listened to fairy tales. And then we watched fairy tales on television. Not my generation, but your generation definitely watched tales on TV. So the need to listen to various stories is quite an archetype. It's quite a basic thing. But the problem with the plot is, in our life, we've listened to thousands of stories. And again, you have to remember, your spectator is well educated. Their heads are full of stories, millions of stories. And there's little freedom. You can say, everything has been already said. When we tell a new story, by definition, we use components that have been used before. Thus, you may ask a question, what can we do not to make our viewer bored? And the answer could be, it is very important indeed what kind of story you're telling. However, much more important is how you are telling your story. How? Well, here you can search for novelties. Here you can surprise the viewer? Well, obviously it's very much complicated with what you see at the very bottom of the table. The style of the film, how it is packed. And again, I'm referring to Kieślowski's film that talks about something that's in fact inaccessible. He talks about the soul of a person. Juliette Binoche, in the second act of the film, has no interaction with the person that she met before. After the dramatic act number 1, she's in a dramatic desert. What is necessary for the viewer to identify with the actress was only achieved by how to say it. So that's something that's really inaccessible. Well, not only inaccessible, it's also painful for the viewer. It's moving for the viewer. Touches them deeply. Well, when we talk about it, about the plot, obviously there are certain principles. Unpredictability. If your viewer knows right from the start how the film will end, it's no good. But quite often there's such a need. For example, at the beginning you say that somebody died, and then you show how the person died, how it happened, and again, the how word matters. Unpredictability in a typical story, well, perhaps not necessarily in a general context concerning the whole of the story, but rather a sequence of it, a part of it, scenes. This is the principle of dramatic acts. Simply, when you tell a story, you have a protagonist. What do you do with the protagonist? He or she has a dramatic problem, a target. And us, the storytellers, we are putting obstacles on his way. We make life more and more complicated for them, because this is the problem of the identification. Then you get furious in the cinema. Well, yes, we already support them. We want him to have easier life. We don't want obstacles. So if our man there in the screen is suffering from these obstacles, we identified with them. We get furious in the cinema. We even sweat. And when everything is smooth, plain sailing, it's irritating. There's no objective in it. It's boring. So unpredictability and the conflict. Conflict. Without a conflict, it's like your dinner. Without first course, second course, and desserts. Without soup, main course, and sweets, you don't have proper dinner. Without conflict, you can't have good film. Full stop. Without conflict, without man against man, or man against obstacles, or a man struggling with an idea, a man struggling with an inner dilemma, without strategy and fight, physical, mental fight, mythical fight, you cannot have dramatic works. Work without conflict is a failure. It can be a subtle thing, it can be a matter of literature, it can be extremely sophisticated, but the conflict must be there. It just must be there, and there is absolutely no discussion about it. Well, yes, surely to be able to identify, to understand the story, the viewer has to be informed. In the cinema, there is the so-called exposure time. To be able to identify with somebody, you have to know who they are, where they are, and what the story is about. So you need to have very many scenes that provide information. And usually, this is the scene of beginners, film directors. They don't understand the biggest opponent in the film. Your biggest enemy is the time. If you can say something in a shorter way, you are better than those that need twice of your time, and especially the informative scenes. The informative scenes are usually free of conflict because you can't build a conflict. Yes, there are certain techniques, and we'll talk about them. We'll use examples from Kieślowski, and we'll say what to do to make your information. Well, I can say directly that Kieślowski, the whole information scene in the blue, the most important information that's necessary to understand the film, he did it when Binoche watched the funeral of her husband and daughter. It was a very dramatic scene, and the Minister of Culture in the testimony provides all the information: who Patrice was, what he did, why France is bereaved. This is a very clever way to provide information. And for film directors would do it in a dialogue. Somebody's talking to somebody else, they are sharing the information. Twice longer, boring, and time loss. And Kieślowski does know you must not do it. If a much better method is to provide this information, not necessarily in this way. This was just marvelous. But the script allowed him to do it. But he was also a clever storyteller. But Double Life of Veronique, there's a scene when the same necessary information is provided during a love scene. A love scene, obviously, it's a different level of viewer involvement. I don't know whether we'll have time to talk about all these issues, but very often you go to the cinema just because you want to watch others. And if love scenes are well made, then they are also an attraction for the visitor, for the viewer, and these love scenes are made as a coverage to provide information. So this is engineering of filmmaking, satisfying viewers' needs. Very often occurs at the very beginning of the film, and the beginning of the film is a dramatic moment for the viewer. Will I love this picture or not? Yesterday I talked about the click moment which an actor had in his head. He said, when I play, I always have this click moment in my head. Simply I imagine a viewer keeping remote control device in their hands, and I play so badly that click and he or she changes the channel. And I try to play like this to stop the viewer from changing the channel. And this is the way you have to think about your film. If a spectator is ready to change the channel or to go out, it just proves that we are a lousy storyteller. Well, I'm not talking about a coincidental watcher. I'm talking about your target group, somebody who came to watch your film. I'm not talking about an abstract of a viewer, because obviously if you have a football supporter and he gets to cinema to watch the blue, then very quickly he goes out, because this person is only interested in football and nothing more. The plot. This is something that I have also noticed in the pre-visualization as non-existent. Often there is a need of subplot. Well, we retell the same stories again and again, and you might call them, or perhaps I should say it differently. It is good to imagine that the plot is the engine of your film. This is the motive power. However, a vehicle does not consist of the engine and control system, but you still have the body of the car, the whole packaging. And surely the packaging consists of different elements, aesthetic elements, or the style, but you also have functional elements. You have the seats, Well, sometimes they're empty, sometimes you have somebody in the seat, as well as other devices, gadgets that are present in today's car. And a car without these gadgets is not a good car, and the same is true about film. Usually the subplot and its connection to the main plot add new value. The plot quite often is the motive power, and it may happen in war films or other ways where the love affair will glue together the bits of the story. It can be anti-war film. It can be a film about how we hate killing others. However, the fundamental plot element is a love story. So subplot quite often adds certain meaning. And the subplot gives the film its body, and quite often, at the end of the day, the value of the film consists in good proportion between the plot and the subplot. However, it rarely happens to have more subplot than the main plot. Well, you don't have a good vehicle with 1,000 of gadgets and an engine from a motorbike. Quite often I watch films that have the engine from a motorbike. However, the body is so beautiful. It all glitters. It looks like a Christmas tree packed with shiny stuff. And we forget during Christmas Eve that the tree covered by all these decorations is dying because it was cut. And again, by recreating certain mechanism which must be relevant to you. I talked about it, but again, it seems important to remember. The process of filmmaking is a long-lasting one. From the idea, through writing, gathering the facts, convincing your colleagues, it takes so much time. So all the time we repeat the same story again, and the same story again. When we start filming, then the story is no longer attractive. We're human beings. Human beings, when they got married, they don't think about divorce. And most people get divorced. The same happens to the film director. They start, it was love on the first sight, and when the film is being made, it's this old, horrible wife. And he, with the horrible wife, has to convince the viewer that this story is worth listening to. It's not true that the story is less attractive now. No, this is him, the film director, because he had to repeat the same joke hundreds of times. He doesn't find the joke funny. How many times can you laugh at the same joke? So then very often, especially young film directors, are more interested in stage directions. They are more interested in gadgets. They are more focused on the outer packaging. They want to put one more lamp on the Christmas tree and one more. Well, first of all, it will all go to the basket. It will be all deleted in post-production because your time economy will be faulty. You'll make a film which instead of an hour and a half, or between an hour 20 or 2 hours, you must not have a film longer than 2 hours. You will have 3 or 4 hours that nobody would like to watch. Well, you can have as much subplot as strong the plot is. These proportions are important. If you change them, well, yes, surely, I know. Film experts always say, Mr. Bad Altman. Surely, yes, there are lots of examples when you have episode-based films. I wouldn't like to elaborate on it. We don't have the time. Surely, there are other examples in Altman. Usually have a kind of problem, ceremony, wedding, or other films. This is the main plot, really. The character is the main plot. You always have some structural force that puts all the elements together, and a certain order in the storytelling must be obeyed, because otherwise your work are no longer interesting. Yes, and very, very briefly, obviously, because we really have to jump from subject to subject, the tragism, the tragedy. If you watch TV, serial movies, if you watch soap opera, you can't expect the drama. You can't expect dramatic. You can't expect any message for your subconscious. However, now, if I ask you what films you can remember, what films did you watch in your life? And if I ask you to make a list of them on a piece of paper, I'm convinced that the films that you can remember are mostly films with a very strong message. Because Shakespeare would not be a good dramatic writer if there were no messages in his dramas. The story about Small Juliet is surely a story about love, but the message in the film is love is not wasted. They died, but because of their death, the two families got closer to each other again. And the film, without the central message, is just soap. It sort of mechanically irritates our senses, but there's no purpose in it. And obviously, in the question, what is the message and the definition of the message, well, usually you would have big discussions about it, and I would not like to elaborate on it. Just a short example, which perhaps will trigger some interest. Well, after New York and the Two Towers, it was so moving, and I read so many articles, and I found one sentence: the world will never be the same after September 11th. Beautiful message. Was a film made? Well, yes. There was a film made about the towers being pulled down. However, there was a film about us as the global society, something that pertains to our universal subconscious. This is the power of the cinema. The cinema, in its mythical language, communicates with our subconscious. Was a film made about it? No. I did not see a film that would be able to talk about this. A great example of a film that was very attractive for the viewer and had a very clear message. Or I don't know, I'm just trying to guess what the message is. I did not talk to the film director, so I cannot know for sure. But The Silence of the Sheep, there was something about transformation, constant transformation. There was this innocent girl from a village, and as a child she suffered seeing sheep slaughtered, because this is what was done in the farm. And thanks to this, when she meets a person who from scientist turned into a monster, then she herself turned into an incredible, mentally incredibly strong person, FBI officer. We have a murderer killing because he wants to be a woman. He needs feminine body, their skin, to get deeper into them. That's why he's haunting them. And then the film director, to highlight the transformation, he added these sequences of a change into a change of a larva into a night moth. But these medical sequences, well, we will talk about establishing in a film. However, these are added elements. Well, basically they highlight the main message of the film. And now, if you want to be creators, if you want to put a stamp on the human soul, if you want your films not to be forgotten, not to be thrown out, well, I watched a soap opera today, I don't remember it tomorrow. These films have to have a strong message. Without a strong message, at the end of the film, we are no longer interested in the story. And the final element after the 4P, we have the style of the film, and definitely it concerns pre-visualization only to some extent, because when you make pre-visualization you have to focus on the first 4 elements, but without doubt the value of pre-visualization is the fact that you can experiment. And I talked about it before. We have watched millions of stories, we know them by heart, we know it all. However, well, I'm lost. And by the way, obviously it was not silence of the sheep, but silence of the lamps some time ago. Eclipse. I have forgotten. It happens. All right, it was about pre-visualization, yes? I sort of had a thought, and it's gone. Okay, anyway. Okay, delete. Let's continue. Right, I know. It's here. It's written here. I'm crazy. So, as I have said, the viewer has watched thousands of stories in their life, and really what makes us, what can potentially make us different from others, is the authenticity. So in other words, yes, I have fallen in love, just as other million people did. I have dates, but I pack my story in a way that nobody else packed it before me. This is my world. I encourage viewers into my world, into my composition, into my way of storytelling. And now, back to pre-visualization, that's why I got lost. Well, back to pre-visualization. It is obvious that it is a sketch. When it is a sketch of the film, you will not pack it in a very attractive way, but be cautious. Very often you have an idea of visualization. You have an idea of a storytelling, not necessarily the picture. I mean, the style is about architecture, the whole construction, the music, the decorations, the rhythm, the way of talking, addition, special effects. So there's a whole array of tools. It is not only about the picture. It's not only the picture, no, the whole thing. Marbeck, when he started his films, he used to write letters to his colleagues, and in the letter, it was a letter, well, obviously now, I don't remember it well, so I have to improvise. In the letter, he wrote different. It was about krzyki I szepty, whispering and shouts. Dear friends, we'll see on location again, and I would like to say what we'll do this time. I would like to make a film about women. I know you're smiling now, because I always film women. Yes, however, this time I would like to tell you a story about feminine soul. And you're smiling again because you also think they always talk about the soul of the woman. But now I would like to talk about feminine soul as the most unpredictable thing in the world. Yes, the feminine soul is red and has different shades of red. In the letter, you have the message and you have the style already. So cries and whispers again. Please watch this film having this letter in your mind. So in other words, the style and the message, these are certain filters with which you make your story interesting. If you have good definition of the style and the message, it's not so that it's just about putting camera here, there and there. No, these two well-constructed elements precisely determine your selection. But you must not forget about it, you just have to remember it. When you talk about the style, then obviously it's again about the genre, a very primitive first element. You may not have a genre cinema. You promise it's going to be a comedy and there's nothing that makes me laugh. Or you promise it will be a thriller and during the first quarter there's nothing frightening. It's a leg pull. We very often forget about a very simple principle, and especially students of film schools forget that there is an excess of products. Students in the film school think that they have found an oasis. He or she thinks everybody is in the desert, thirsty, searching for water, and there is the oasis, the masterpiece made by this student, and everybody wants to get there. But students can't see the fact that there's an avalanche of films, that there's pouring rain of movies. You have to stand out. You have to buy the viewer without having a big name, without a star. You have to do something for the people to go to the cinema to watch your film. Nobody's waiting for your films. Nobody is waiting for your films. Viewers hate you. If you become aware of this, then you'll manage to overcome obstacles. And the beginning of the film is very important. This is the fundamental fight for the viewers. So, when I buy a ticket to the cinema, what do I actually do? I give a loan. It's like a bank loan given to the film director. And my money is just a bank loan. I'm buying holiday. It's a holiday packet bought now. However, if it's going to be a leg pull made by the tourist agent, if the film director will not be able to pull me into the story, click, I'm disappointed, I change the channel or leave the cinema room. So the fight for the viewer's soul starts right at the beginning, and the dramatic impact of the film is not a dead animal. So something that was attractive 20 years ago is no longer attractive, it's boring. Because what happens with us all? We are so very impatient. What happens to you when you see just another website? How much time you give to the man that constructed this website? 3 seconds. It has been tested. After 3 seconds, if you find a website dull, click, you change it. Well, surely as filmmakers you get a bit more time. However, definitely less than we had 20 years ago. And in fact, and now there's another suggestion, please think about something that became a fact in the cinema a long time ago. Certain principles have been twisted. Well, the drama consisting in the exposure at the beginning is not always the right choice. Ryan, you remember this film? The exposure starts at the very beginning. I have to excuse all the meaning. He's just fucking you up. He's making the viewer sweat in the cinema. And when you look at the dramatic model of the film, nothing in the film is as strong as the very beginning. Is Ryan a bad film? No, it's a very good one. And I'm just giving you an example. So it was Saving Private Ryan in English. So when you have a war film, perhaps this film will not have too much to do with Ryan, but it's Amelia. In Amelia, during the first 20 minutes, much longer, in Amelia you have exactly the same kind of attack as the war sequence in Saving Private Ryan. And you know what happened? If you send this script to an American reader, this script would be instantly in the basket because he would wrote correctly according to the paradigm. 20 minutes at the beginning are excessive, not needed, because the story starts with her finding the box in the wall with the bowl with the message of the man who used to live here. So these are examples of dramatic storytelling. At the very beginning, you have to conquer the viewer. Later on, they will not leave us easily. That's why I'm referring to Kieślowski, because this is exactly what he did. The second act is boring. Yes, true, it is boring. However, at the beginning, all the drama started in the first act. Everything dramatic in the first act. Later on, you don't have a scene with the same electricity that you had in the act number 1. It starts with an accident, then dramatic hospital, then dramatic funeral, child dying. We are all feeling into it, and this weird decision to get rid of millions of property for somebody who lives a simple life. It's weird and erotic scene, and it's not repeated later on in the film. So in the first act you have all the tension. In the second act you have desert. She's sitting there by herself, drinking coffee, swimming by herself, playing with decorations, listening to the music. What is it? Nothing in it. Nothing. Zero. So when I watched pre-visualizations sent by you, in most cases the beginning was boring. Boring. If you have an excess of artworks around us, nobody will watch them. Perhaps, yes, this is just pre-visualization. Maybe the final product would be much better, but what is missing is the hook. Especially young cinema does have to have a hook, because you are beginning players. If you want to play in Bundesliga, you have to be 3 times better than Germans and French players there are. And this is the very same rule. The film, unfortunately, is a product. It's a produce. You don't have any logo yet. You can work hard to generate your logo, but you don't have it yet. And now, what time is it, by the way? Perhaps somebody will tell me. 11. So I'll suggest, who of you has read the script of The Blue? The script of The Blue? Are you familiar with it? John, you? Yeah, did you read The Blue script? Nie dostałeś? Well, because before we see the film, I would like to talk about the script a bit. I would like to hear what you think about it. I guess all of you watched the film a long time ago, so perhaps it would make sense to talk about it so that later on we could have the confrontation. So let's have 5 minutes break, and let's reconvene in 5 minutes. If you still are patient enough, I'm not going to torture you for too long. However, I would be happy to close this stage. Then we'll have the film, and then we'll have examples from the film. But because it's a very important stage, this is the libretto, and then we'll have to follow the changes made in the film, and I will try. We don't know, obviously. I will not explain why it happened this way or the other way. I'll just propose a little discussion. But now let's have 5 minutes break.